Hey guys, Nate here with another data science interview question. This question is from Facebook. It's going to test your ability to write window functions, rank data, and use advanced SQL functions like coalesce. So as always, I'll walk you through the question like I'm on the interview and give you some tips on how I would approach the solution and how to effectively talk to the interviewer. It's as simple as that. So let's get started. But first, if you like content like this, please subscribe to this channel. Okay, so this question is from Facebook. It's called Rank Variance Per Country. The question reads, which countries have risen in the rankings based on the number of comments between December 19th versus January 2020? Hint, avoid gaps between ranks when ranking countries. Okay, so whether on an interview or on the day job, I like to solve each and every question exactly in the same way. I have a 3-step framework that I use to solve each and every problem that I encounter. So the first step is to understand the data, especially the column headers and what each column means. Typically on an interview, you're not going to be able to see the values in the data set. So it's really important to understand what each column means and how to use it in your solution. The second step is to formulate your approach. And what I mean by that is to write out step by step how exactly you're going to solve the problem before writing any code. There are a lot of advantages to this. One, you can validate your assumptions with the interviewer. 2, you can logically parse out steps that lead to your solution. So you're building the solution in steps. So you're logically parsing out steps to your solution. So you're basically mapping out your entire solution and providing a roadmap for you to later on use as a reference as you're coding. This makes your job so much more easier if you just kind of write it all out beforehand. And the last step is code execution, which is basically writing out your code, writing out your solution. And there's a specific way to do this, especially on an interview, and I'll go over how to do that in this video. All right, so with these 3 steps outlined, let's actually tackle them one by one. Let's start with the first step. All right, so the first step is to explore your data. So again, typically on interviews, you're not going to be able to look at the data set. So let's just first start at just looking at the data schema. So we have 2 tables here, Facebook comments count and Facebook active users. And what I like to do is go back to the question and try to map out parts of the question to specific parts in the table. So when I read the question again, which countries have risen in rankings based on the number of comments between December 19th and January 2020, I'm basically looking at countries here and trying to find where countries would be in these 2 tables. So in active users, there is a country column. So I feel like that's what I need. Then there are number of comments. So I want to understand where in these data sets comments would be logged or stored. There's a number of comments column here. And then of course, December 19th and January 2020, these are timestamps or dates. And there is a created at and then date time data type column here in the comments count table. So I feel like these 3 columns is what I need. And if I want to join these 2 tables together, it looks like user ID are 2 columns that match, right? So that line of thinking is what I want to validate with the interviewer. Basically, are these 3 columns what I need to answer the question? Can I use user ID to join these 2 tables together? So if you have that, you have most of it. There's another little nuance, especially when you're trying to join tables together. What kind of join are you going to use to join these 2 tables together, right? Some of that has to do with figuring out what sort of join you're going to use. Is kind of a function of what the question is giving you, what it wants, and also how the table is behaving, right? So this is a conversation again with the interviewer. When I look at these 2 tables, one is called comments count, one is called active users. My assumption here is that active users is sort of like a master list of all of the users, and the comments count table is essentially just the number of comments or the comments that users have created. So the user IDs in the comments count table is likely a subset of the active users table because not every user may have actually commented. So another way of saying that is you won't find every single user in the comments count table that you'll find in the active users table. So in this case, a left join from active users to comments count is probably what I would want if I wanted to preserve all of the users in this active users table. So I'm going to use a left join, but what I'm trying to say is talk to your interviewer, tell them what you're thinking and why it actually matters to the solution, and see if they agree with you. That's really just the best way to show the user that you understand how to manipulate data and the nuances with the functions you're going to use and with the data itself. Okay, so the second step. So now that we understand the data, the second step is to formulate your approach, or basically write out your approach. And again, the reason why you're doing this is to validate your approach and your assumptions with the interviewer before you start coding, but also it helps to provide a roadmap for yourself when you do start coding. So let's write out our approach. So I'm gonna hide the question here, and my first step will be to join these two tables together, comments count and active users. We're going to join using the user ID column, and we're going to be using a left join as explained earlier. And because we only care about comments made in December 2019 and January 2020, we're going to limit our comments to just these timeframes here. And because these are two timeframes, I'm going to actually create two subqueries that will be able to handle December 2019 and January 2020. So I'll say create two subqueries for my solution. The other nuance is to exclude rows where the country is empty. So just in case I have a user that doesn't have a country affiliation, what I'm going to do is just remove that user from the solution, because the question itself is to just have the countries in the output of the question. It doesn't necessarily want users without countries. So because of this, I'm going to exclude rows where a country is empty, so where users do not have countries. Again, this is an assumption I'm making, so confirm that with your interviewer. Now, once I have the data set all kind of clean, I want to then sum the number of comments per country. And then we're gonna do this for December and January, just like what I said up here, create two subqueries. We're gonna actually create the subqueries down here. Okay, so now that we have a subquery for December and then one for January, we need to compare December and January comments. So we're gonna join these two subqueries together. I'm gonna be using a full join, and I'm gonna explain to you why I'm gonna use a full join when I'm coding, so I can actually show you the outputs and why you would want to use a full out join versus like an inner left or right. But as you get to this part on an interview, this is actually where you want to explain your choice of joins to an interviewer. So once I've joined the December and January subqueries, I then want to be able to rank the comments per country. So I will then rank the 2019 comments by itself and then rank the 2020 comments by itself to then compare later on. And so the final step is to apply that ranking and compare the countries and the comments together. And what you want in the output is basically just the countries that have declined in ranking, in which case what I'm going to say is the January rank is higher than the December rank. That will start to make sense once I start coding and once you see the output. So you understand what rank 1 means versus what rank 7 means. All right, so now that we formulated our approach, let's start coding. This is the third and final step in our framework. So the first step is to join the two tables on user ID using a left join. And the assumption here is we're going to use a left join because not all users have made comments and we want to preserve that user list. Okay, so here's my join statement. I am left joining active users to comments count on user ID here. And when you run this code, it does execute and you have something. So the code is correct. Essentially, you could use a left join, and I'm thinking about it again, you can actually use an inner join if you want, and it would still be valid because what you're trying to do is count all of the comments being made. And so if a user hasn't made a comment, then there's no need to actually count, right? Count that user because they haven't made any comments, and that's what you're trying to count in the final stages. All right, so a left join or an inner join would work now that I think about it again. So now the next step is to filter our tables for December 2019 and January 2020. So all I really need to do is add a where clause here. So this is my where clause for December. If I run the query, I get all rows where the comment was created in December 2019. All right, so I'm actually just going to make this into a CTE. That way I can do the same thing for January. So if I extend this out to January, I get basically the exact same query, but just for the January 2020 timeframe. And now I have a December CTE called December Summary and a January CTE called January Summary. Now looking at the third step here, exclude rows where country is empty, what I could also do is just extend the where clause and say, and country is not null. And basically what we're doing is removing rows where there is no country. So a user ID here, is not affiliated with any country. Because the question is asking about countries, we want to just basically remove any comments or any counts from users that do not have a country affiliated with them. And so we can just do that by adding a country is not null in the where clause. So that takes care of step number 3. And then step number 4 is to sum the number of comments per country. So basically in the select clause, you want 2 things. You want the country down here, and then a sum of the number of comments from the comments count table. So that's actually relatively easy. All we really need to do is replace this asterisk with a country and then a sum of number of comments. And since this is for December, we can name this row as number of comments December. And then of course we need a group by, so we'll group by country, and we'll do the exact same thing but for January. Okay, this is my January summary now. Country, sum of number of comments as number of comments January, and then group by country. If I want to take a look at the output, what I can do is just do a select star from December summary. Maybe I'll just do a left join January summary J on D country is equal to J dot country, because the country column here is really the only possible join that I have, or join key that I have. So let's just see if this whole thing works or runs. If I run the code and view the output in a separate browser, what I get is essentially country, number of comments in December, country, number of comments in January. All right, so things are starting to look pretty good. I am here, sum the number of comments per country. Now I have create subqueries for December and January. Basically, instead of subqueries, I created CTEs for December and January. So I'm basically done with this step. So let me actually remove it. And now I want to use a full join to compare December 19th and January 20 comments. What I did was I used the left join instead, but let's look at what a full join gives us. So I'm going to run this code here and view the output in a separate browser. So this is what a full join gets us. And basically we have 2 edge cases here. So the first edge case is where a country has comments in January, as you see here with Denmark, but doesn't have comments in December. So that's why you have a null right here. And then the second edge case you'll see is basically the reverse of that. A country, Canada, has comments in December, but doesn't have comments in January. So this can actually be handled in 2 different ways. So this is a full join, right? So this is the first way it can be handled. And what I can do is I can basically just create a master list of all of the countries, which means that Denmark would move to the left. And then I would basically have a list of all of the countries that appear in December or January, right? So that was my original thought, to use a full join. But when I think about it again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the question. The question says, which countries has risen in rankings based on the number of comments between December and January? So basically what that means is I'm evaluating countries that have a higher ranking or more comments in January versus December, right? So they've risen in ranking. So they've had relatively more comments in January than in December. So what that means is if you don't have any comments in January, it means there's no way that you would actually be able to rise in rankings if you have comments in December, right? So another way of actually saying this is Canada doesn't even count because Canada doesn't have any January comments. And that's true in general terms. If you're a country with no comments in January, you are not rising in the rankings, which means that I can use a full join and get this, or I can actually just use a left join and make sure my table is January left joining to my December table. Right? And so what that means is I can actually just use a left join, but what I'm gonna have to do is just switch the January table, the January summary with the December one. And if I run this query here and output it into a separate browser, what I get is on the left this time, I get the January summary. And then on the right, I get the December summary. And I have just one edge case here where Denmark had comments in January, but didn't have any in December. But what that means is Denmark actually rose in rankings, right? So we want to keep this. So doing a left join actually makes a lot of sense to the context of the question being asked. But again, you could have used a full join and just handled both of the edge cases. If we do a left join, as you saw here, we're really just left with one edge case to handle, right? So what I'm gonna do is just keep with this left join, and I'm just gonna write, instead of a full join, a left join to compare the December and January comments. So you might ask yourself, why am I changing the logic around sort of like on the fly? Well, I mean, that is actually pretty realistic on the day job. As you are sort of like writing things out, what you think the answer is gonna be, it's gonna change. Your logic and your approach is gonna change based off of how the data behaves and how you're thinking about it as you're coding. So this is very realistic to day-to-day operations at a job, and that's kind of the reason why I'm just showing this to you right now. But on an interview, you don't necessarily have a database where you can execute your code, so you can't see how the code is behaving based off of the data in the data set. So in an interview, you don't have much to go off of, so you have to code based off of what you wrote down in the previous section. And that's totally fine. And the result really just means that you might have to handle more edge cases in this case, because I can think of kind of more simpler, more effective ways to really code up the solution. But the reverse is also true in that there could be more edge cases that I didn't think about in the previous section when I was writing out the approach that I have to actually add into my code, making my code much more complex, right? So that's why I think interviews are simpler, because you're basically writing out your code exactly to how you wrote out your approach. And if you validated this approach with your interviewer, then all you really need to do is just write out the code exactly how you basically wrote out the steps here. Okay, so let's move on. Let's go to the second to last step, which is basically applying the ranks, right? And so this is saying rank 2019 comment counts here, the December one, and then rank the 2020. So the question is really, what rankings should I use? So there are multiple ranking functions. There's row number, dense rank, rank. There was a hint here in the question where it says, avoid gaps between ranks when ranking companies. That basically gives you what ranking function to actually use. So without actually going into detail about the other ranking functions, I'm gonna say we're gonna use dense rank. The reason why we wanna use a dense rank was because of the hint. The hint said to not skip rankings, right? So that's exactly what a dense rank gives you. And so you'll see here that the ranking is based off of employee name. There are 3 tools here, so 3 number ones, and then it goes straight into number 2. And so it's not skipping any rankings at all. Versus a rank function will skip to from a number 1 to a number 4, which is not what we want for this question. Okay, so I've applied the dense rank here. It's applied right here with the window function. I'm gonna apply a dense rank over basically an order of the sum of comments here. and then rank them in descending order. And I'll show you what that means in the output. But I do that for December, and then I do that for January here. And so when I run the code and I view the output in a separate browser, what I'm getting is the country rank for January and the country rank for December on the right here, right? So the countries with the most amount of comments get the top rank. And you see there's a tie in ranking here. Right. Same thing for December. The country USA with the most amount of comments got ranked number 1, and that's because we applied a descending order. And so if I remove the descending part of this, the order would have been by default ascending, which means that the country with the lowest amount of comments would be ranked number 1. Which is totally fine. We just have to kind of readjust the solution a little bit to get to the appropriate answer. But it's just kind of weird to think about rank number 1 being affiliated with the country with the least amount of comments, right? And so that's the reason why, if we go back, that's the reason why I applied a descending order to the ranking. So applying this logic, what we want to do is identify countries that have risen in rankings. And so it's sort of counterintuitive of what we need to do. So if a country has risen in ranking, so let me take Mali as an example here. Risen in ranking means that they are ranked number 1 in January or higher in January than they were in December. But it's not higher in number, it's higher in ranking. It's actually lower in number, right? So 1 is lower than 3, but they actually rose in ranking, which means that the code I need to write, I can just put this in the where clause down here. I need to say where the January country rank is actually less than the December country rank. So that's actually what I wrote should be flipped. It should be the January rank is less than the December country rank. So if I run this code here and view its output, I'm left with basically 3 countries, right? All 3 of these countries have risen in ranks from December to January. But there's an edge case that I'm actually missing. So if I go back to my previous view, what I'm missing is actually this December edge case right here. Basically, Denmark is missing from the output because this December rank is null, right? So you can't really evaluate the ranking between January and December if the December ranking is null. So how do we actually deal with that? So one way to deal with that is just by saying, or the December country is null. If I view that output, I get now 4 countries, right? And all we really want in our output is just a list of the countries. So instead of select everything, we're just going to say select January countries. If I run this code and then I check the solution, my solution is correct. All right, so that's it for me today. This was a hard level problem from a Facebook data science interview, and it really tested our ability to break down a difficult problem into its components and really understand how to apply some advanced functions like window partitions, rankings, choosing the appropriate ranking function, the correct joins, as well as understanding how the data would behave based off of the ordering and based off of the functions and its outputs. The trick to this problem was really just to organize your thoughts before you started to code. So basically writing down your approach into small digestible steps. This would provide a roadmap to your solution when you start coding, but also it helps the interviewer understand what your approach is and what you're actually trying to do, as well as validating all of the assumptions. All right, that's it for me today. If you have any questions or comments about this video or about this question, please provide a comment in the comment section. If you like this type of content, please subscribe to this channel. Thanks.